So much is changing right now in the NFL landscape, especially for wide receivers, for quarterbacks. We need to do a reset. We need a new 2023 wide receiver ranking video, and it begins right now.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.
Take a lap.
Jamar Chase, JJ, Jamar Chase. Look, I mean, you could argue one over the other. If you want to talk about quarterback advantage, Jamar Chase all day long. Joe Burrow could be arguably the number one quarterback in fantasy football 2023. Him and Mahomes are my dynasty QB 1 and 2. In no particular order, I kind of like Burrow a little more. I think Burrow is going to get better and better and better. And they just brought in left tackle Orlando Brown. They inked Orlando Brown to a 4-year, $64 million deal. Things are looking up for Joe Burrow in terms of protection. Things are looking up for the Bengals. The Bengals are already a top 4 team. Look what they've done the last 2 years. I think Joe Burrow is hungry to win a Super Bowl in 2023. Jamar Chase, if healthy, could have 15 plus touchdowns in 2023. JJ's kind of like Julio Jones back in the day. Massive yardage, a potential to score a lot of touchdowns. It's not really his fault. But when you look at his game log, 8 touchdowns last year, 10 the year before, 7 the year before. There's just a little, right now anyway, a little limitation on how he can get into that double-digit touchdown territory. But the yardage is there, 1809, 128 receptions, 10 100-plus yard games, and then 8 scores. I mean, JJ had a year. He had a year in 2022. We thought he was going toward 2,000 yards receiving. If he could get into the 14, 15, 16 touchdown territory, he'd be by far the number one overall player. Dynasty redraft doesn't matter. But it does feel like we have a trend of 8, 10, 7. I would say 8 to 11 touchdowns is kind of his sweet spot for TD production. And while I don't think Jamar Chase is getting 18 or 2,000 yards, I think even if he got 1,500, his ability to get, 12 to 17 touchdowns, that's all there for the taking for Jamar. I think Jamar really could have one of those 17, 18 touchdown seasons in the next, year or two, hopefully in 2023. So this is a preference. I mean, I don't want to hear anybody arguing over Jamar Chase or JJ over Jamar Chase. Where it gets interesting is wide receiver number 3. I myself have little Cooper Kupp at number 3 overall because, look, I understand that the Rams defense is going to be a concern. I get we don't know what's really going on with Stafford or how he's going to bounce back if he even plays in 2023. Cooper Kupp didn't return last year after getting hurt, but it's not like he suffered through some kind of like season-ending injury that was traumatic or crazy. He had an ankle injury. There was nothing to play for, no reason to rush him back. Cooper Kupp probably could have hit the field if the Rams had something to play for. I fully believe in redraft he can be the number 1 overall player in fantasy football. He could be the number 1 wide receiver. So I think at number 3, it's pretty good value. I feel like by default, Cooper Kupp's protected into some seriously good baked-in value in 2023. I mean, take a look at what he did in 2021. 1947, 145 receptions, 16 touchdowns. Now, granted, when you really look at Cooper Kupp's entire career history, you're kind of like, wait. He didn't do this for multiple years. I mean, really, look at 2020, 974, 3 TDs, 2019, 1161, 10 TDs, 566 yards. In 2018, he got injured. Remember, he tore his ACL. So Cooper Kupp, really hasn't had the big explosions year after year after year after year. It kind of feels like he has, but it's weird when you look at his game log that he's not really a lock to be this 1,900-yard receiver and 16 TDs, but I do feel like he's very comfortably placed at number 3. And let's say he has a 14 or 1,500-yard season and 12 to 14 touchdowns. That's going to very much be where you drafted him at, that type of value range. So I have no problem putting Cooper Kupp number 3. I also have no problem putting my number 4 or 5 ahead of Cooper Kupp, especially if you consider the cost of entry. So if I'm sitting there at number 7 and I'm thinking to myself, I could go Bijan a little early here at 7, 8, 9. I don't want you going Bijan earlier than 7, 8, or 9. You got to promise me you're not going to go ruining his ADP. 7, I'm okay with it. 8, 9, perfect. Don't take Bijan Robinson earlier than you have to. But if you're sitting there at number 7 and you're thinking to yourself, I kind of want to go with a Garrett Wilson later. I want to go with a later wide receiver in round number 2. I'm going to go ahead and pass on Cooper Kupp here. I'm going to take Bijan and I'm going to go wide receiver in round number 2. I'm okay with that. That's where I'm at with Cooper Kupp. I'm very much into his 6, 7, 8 overall value because he falls there 8 times out of 10. At least a number 6 or 7 overall, but that's where Bijan gets interesting. So I get it if you want to go in a different direction than Cooper Kupp, but he is a fantastic bet, I think, as the third wide receiver in 2023. Number 4 is Tyreek Hill, who looks every bit as fast as he's looked his entire life. He hasn't slowed down yet. He's a player, though, these speedy guys, you got to watch them because they tend to have hamstring injuries as they get later into their career. He's going to be a year-to-year type of call for me, and I'm okay putting him 4 or 5 in 2023. I have no problems doing that. I think he'll be a top 4 or 5 wide receiver, no doubt. But we have to play this year by year. In Dynasty, we're going to want to put maybe these other 2 guys that come after him ahead of him in Dynasty. But in redraft, I'm very, very comfortable with Tyreek Hill, number 4. But like I said with Cooper Kupp, if you want to go in a different direction, instead of going Tyreek Hill as your wide receiver 1 and then going running back in round 2, if you want to go, let's say, Bijan at number 7 or 8 or 9 instead of Tyreek Hill, and then in round 2, you get your wide receiver, I'm okay with that as well. But Tyreek Hill, who had 119 receptions, 17-10, only 7 touchdowns, 8 if you include the rushing touchdown. He can outdo this. He can have, let's say, a 1650 receiving, whatever, 110 to 115 receptions, or he could repeat this. I'm just saying, if you were to dumb down his wide receiver stats a little bit, that 7 TDs easily could go to 12. So I think number 3, 4, 5 is very, very doable overall for wide receivers 2023 for Tyreek Hill. He's a very safe 4th wide receiver, 4th or 5th wide receiver to draft. And many might even put him number 3 over Cooper Kupp. And I can understand that. But if I had to project a season, 115 reception-wise, 1650, and let's call it 11 to 12 TDs. 13 if you include the rushing TD he probably will get in 2023. Love Tyreek Hill. Number 5 is where it gets really interesting. And number 5 is where I kind of feel like there's a top 3 wide receiver potentially sitting here at number 5 overall, and the advantage is to get him in the 5 or 6 wide receiver spot, not number 2 or 3. Don't reach, don't get crazy. You need to draft him at the perfect place. Number 5 overall 2023, my breakout wide receiver of the year. We've been talking about him all offseason long. My boy, your boy, the man, the myth, the legend, Garrett Wilson. We love little Garrett Wilson, don't we? And Aaron Rodgers is going to turn him into a Mars man, which, we have him on the Mars man list if you didn't know.
He's on a shuttle to Mars. Mars man.
I mean, look at Garrett Wilson in this wonderful group of Mars men.
Loads dropping and spinning aimlessly in space.
Of course, he's a moon man as well, but you have to be a moon man to get to the Mars man list, essentially. Well, not really, but at some point you did need to graduate from Mars school, from moon school to get to Mars school. But Garrett Wilson's going to be arguably he could be number 2. He could be number 3. He could be number 4. I think ultimately he's a top 4 wide receiver. I rank him here to build in some safety mechanisms. I feel like Aaron Rodgers just turned Christian Watson into a top 10 wide receiver go forward. Very mature wide receiver that wouldn't have been matured and set up for success in 2023 if Aaron Rodgers wasn't there to teach him, groom him, sculpt him, and bring him along on a fast track. And Garrett Wilson's already top 5 wide receiver material. He's top 5 to 7 without Aaron Rodgers. He's top 5 to 8 if you put, like, let's say, another quarterback back there. Even Mike White, who I like a lot. But when you put Aaron Rodgers in the mix here, he's going to take an already fast-tracked wide receiver who fast-tracked himself in Garrett Wilson last year. He's going to fast-track him again. He's going to double stamp a triple stamp, or triple stamp a double stamp, however you want to put it. It's happening, and it's happening in 2023. Garrett Wilson, this absolute monster, as a rookie, had 147 targets, 83 receptions. Those numbers will be closer in 2023 with an accurate throwing Aaron Rodgers instead of 3 quarterbacks cycling through musical chairs of QB play. But 83 receptions for 1103 and 4 TDs. That's so impressive for Garrett Wilson. This is going to be a 10 to 14 number right here. Touchdowns. Let's call it 11. 11 touchdowns, 13 to 1,400 yards, and 100 receptions. He's going to be a top 5 wide receiver. I can't wait to see it happen. And even if Aaron Rodgers leaves next year, he plays 1 year, look, Garrett Wilson's going to be fine. They're going to be aggressive, and they're going to bring in another quarterback. We'll play that by ear. In Dynasty, there's a little bit of a different conversation we got to have, but I don't think it changes anything. If anything, Garrett Wilson is in my number 3 spot for Dynasty, no matter what the quarterback situation is. I think it'll be okay. I think it'll be taken care of, but we'll worry about that in another video and on the Dynasty channel. Link down below in the description if you want to get on the Dynasty channel. But Garrett Wilson, number 5. So excited. Let's go, Garrett. Let's go. Mashed potatoes! Number 6, we can't leave Stefan Diggs off of this list. I mean, Diggs is number 6. He's arguable at 4 and 5. So kind of like how Cooper Kupp is good value and Hill's good value because by default they can't rank higher and they could rank higher at the end of the day. I think Diggs is in a real good spot to not disappoint you. Protected very well in the 6 or 5-6 range. Very capable of more. But, you got to pick. I got to have some guys that rank higher than others. I know a lot of people are going to be upset saying Diggs is a boss. What are you doing? He's so accurate. He's so consistent, this and that. I get it. And I like him a lot. But I'm going to go ahead and say maybe Buffalo addresses the second wide receiver position in the draft or in the coming weeks. We'll have to kind of see how that plays out. Wouldn't be shocked if Hopkins ended up in Buffalo or some kind of crazy offseason move happens or the Bills get aggressive and go after a wide receiver. In the NFL draft, the Bills have the 27 overall pick, but maybe they move up. Maybe they move up and try and get a big name wide receiver. We don't really know what they're going to do. We also think they could go after Derrick Henry. There's a lot of potential moves that they could be looking to make on the offensive side of the football to level up with the Kansas City Chiefs, which is, I think, what everybody's trying to do right now. Last year, Diggs had 108 for 1429 and 11 TDs. That was an unbelievable year. I feel like it was understated. I feel like people don't talk about how well he played, and this is why people get mad when you have Diggs at 6 instead of 4. But I think 1410 on 100 even is probably what my gut says, and I like him. There's nothing wrong with putting Diggs at 4 or 5. I think this is a great group of wide receivers. You got to order them a certain way, right? No one's wrong or right here. This is why we play the game, and I think Diggs is very comfortably placed right here. Partly because I do believe the Bills will try and address the offense differently in 2023 and spread out balance it out, if you will, which could maybe take a little bit away from Diggs, but not a ton. I still have him number 5 or 6 overall. CeeDee Lamb, number 7. He had a great year. Lamb had 156 targets, 107 receptions, 1359, and 5 100-yard games and 9 TDs. If he ever gets into the 13, 14 TD territory, this is a top 3 wide receiver. I think you rank him here to be safe. You rank him here because Dak's a little unpredictable. The Cowboys are a little unpredictable. The play calling is going to all change, and we don't know what they're going to do, how successful they're going to be. I think it's just safe to put him 6, 7 overall. I don't think it's a knock on him. I think it packages in some nice risk, and I love him at number 6 or 7 overall. I think CeeDee Lamb's a steal there, and by default, he belongs there. So this is a good wide receiver. Top of round 2, sometimes you see him go late round 1, and it's understandable. Number 8, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He had a monster year last year. Look, this Detroit team's going to continue to get better. Goff's a little bit of a concern long term, but in terms of redraft 2023, Goff, what he did in 2022 was amazing. Him and Kirk Cousins were very, very underrated walking into the season, and him and Kirk Cousins balled out. It deserved more respect, even from me. So for 2023, we're going to give Jared Goff respect. We're going to say that St. Brown's going to hold off Jameson Williams to a degree, but Jameson will be a little bit of a worry as we head into midseason and beyond. I think he's still going to be proving some things in the early part of the year. He wasn't ready. People had high expectations for Jameson Williams in the second half of the season, and I tried to warn everybody that it's not going to be what you think. He might give us a flash, a very small flash, and he kind of did. And I think this is what people expected him to do at the end of 2022. I think he'll maybe do a little of that in the beginning of 2023, but it'll be mid-season on that he tries to separate himself from St. Brown, and I don't know he'll be successful doing that because I still think this is the number 1 wide receiver on the team. But if you were to ask me to be objective and honest, either one could be the number 1. Jameson Williams, his talent, his ability, his acceleration ability can't be overlooked. And so these 2 guys are going to kind of share that 1B and 1B role. Neither one of them in time will probably be the 1A. They're both that good. And so they need a quarterback. They'd be so smart to go get Lamar Jackson. Maybe that happens. Maybe I'm telling you this now and then something brews later. But they'd be so smart to get a quarterback in here for the long term because I like Goff. I know Goff played well last year, but I don't think he's the long-term answer. And they need one of these big gunslingers. And Lamar's not the biggest pocket passer in the world, but he's good enough to facilitate and make this team a Super Bowl contending team. He really is. So hopefully they smarten up and they look into it and they lift the hood up on the Lamar Jackson situation. But St. Brown for 2023, very safe territory. His 106 receptions for 1161 and 6 TDs can easily be replicated in 2023. And even if he has, let's say 100 receptions and 1080 and 6 or 7 touchdowns, this rushing is important and effective. 95 yards on 9 carries. He could run for 15, 20 times, get a rushing touchdown. He's such a diverse, unbelievable talent talent. And so I think duplicating sum total his numbers in 2023 from 2022, very, very doable, especially given he had like a stretch of games where he wasn't effective. He was banged up. This is so doable. He could probably get 100 receptions for 1,200 yards and 7 or 8 touchdowns. It's very, very doable. St. Brown is a steal in this 8 territory. He's easily capable of being 5, 6, or 7 overall. So this is a very, very good positioning for him to be defaulted into. Jalen Waddle. Hard to put him higher. I know it's hard to put him lower than this, and I agree with that, but hard to put him higher when he's the number 2 wide receiver. And it's an offense that very much makes that an understandable thing. But at the same time, I can't in good conscience put him at number 8 or 7 or 6, but he's very comfortable here. He's a top 10 wide receiver, and you're getting him at wide receiver 9. So pretty much you're getting what you pay for, maybe a little bit more value than you're paying for, because he could be a top 5 to 7 wide receiver, but this is a pretty good spot for me, especially with the unknowns with Tua. And Mike White's going to get in there and start some games. I hate to say that. I'm rooting for Tua. I'm not wishing injury upon him. We very much want him to be healthy, but I highly doubt Tua is going to stay upright. And Mike White, what an amazing signing.
Mashed potatoes!
This guy, Mike McDaniel, knows what he's doing. Mike White is a fantastic signing. So we'll see. Maybe Mike White loves Waddle more than Tyreek. Who knows? But Mike White's going to start games. We just need to see what's up before we start moving Waddle around. This is a very safe place for him. And number 10, the final wide receiver. It's got to be Adams.
Smitty, did you forget Davante Adams, you moron?
No, and I've waited until this very moment to discuss it. In fact, actually, let's discuss Davante Adams after I drop my number 10, which is not Davante Adams. So all you Jimmy G supporters are going to have to wait one more player. This is my number 10. His name is A.J. Brown. He plays for the Eagles. The Eagles are going to be just fine. Everybody crying about the Eagles, saying, oh, cry, Eagles, cry. People crying about the Eagles is so annoying. It gets so old. The Eagles are coming for blood in 2023. And for all you people saying, oh, they lost so many people, they brought back people too. And they also have, might I remind you, the number 10 and the number 30 overall draft selections in 2023. So guess what? They're going to be fine. They're going to be stronger than ever. Not to mention, if they don't draft Bijan or Jahmyr Gibbs with one of these 2 draft selections in round 1, let's say they use it on defensive pieces, guess what they could do? Trade a second rounder for Henry, a second rounder for Cook, a second rounder for Eckler, a second rounder for Nick Chubb. We don't know. All 4 running backs are potentially kind of available, and the Eagles are aggressive. So enjoy the show. If you want to doubt A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, who is hard to put in this top 10, but he's right on the verge of getting into this group. I just want you to know that. Other players on the verge of getting into this group would be T. Higgins, Christian Watson, Deebo Samuel, Drake London, DK Metcalf. Those are all guys that are kind of in the mix for the 11 to 14, 11 to 15. So if one of those guys was your guys, don't think they're that far behind. Drake London, I very much want to put in this group, but without the quarterback support that we thought he could have through a Lamar Jackson signing, and we're waiting on that. I got to put him right outside the top 10. But those are my top 10. And for people saying, hey, Smitty, where is Davante Adams? Are you out of your mind? Where's my Davante Adams graphic? Here he is. This guy, Davante Adams, is going to be on the decline. I hate to say it. He's such a good wide receiver, but he made his own bed. He wanted to go to the Raiders. We knew that it probably wouldn't work out, not because we didn't like Carr. It's just a total abyss for wide receivers to go to. We talk about it on the show all the time. You get traded to the Raiders and you just fall apart. We saw Randy Moss go to the Raiders and look bad for 2 seasons. We thought he was done. He goes to New England and pulls in, 23 TDs? Antonio Brown, remember when he was traded to Buffalo for like 10 minutes? Refused to go. He went to the Raiders. Burned his feet off. Davante Adams caught, 1,500-ish yards, 100 receptions, and 14 TDs under the command of Derek Carr, regardless of what Derek Carr did in the win-loss column, which wasn't his fault because he had one of the worst defenses in NFL history in Oakland and in Las Vegas. His entire reign as a Raider, he's had one of the worst defenses, bottom 4 almost in every category every single year. And this team brings in Jimmy Garoppolo, who can't throw more than 10 or 15 yards downfield. And he made his name throwing to Deebo Samuel at the line of scrimmage on design plays that Deebo was turning into a wide back. Do people understand when he threw to Deebo over and over and over, and Deebo turned it upfield? That was a wide back. That was a running back making moves. And I don't want to hear Jimmy's a winner. He's not a winner. Winning is a team stat, and he was on a team that won. The team carried him. Jimmy G is he's a bottom 5 quarterback at best in the NFL, and he's going into a situation where Derek Carr is a much better quarterback, and we're going to see that in New Orleans with a top 10 defense to support him. Derek Carr's 10 times the quarterback of Jimmy G. And you take away Waller, you have an unhappy Jacobs. And again, if he could have 1,000 yards and 7 TDs, I'm not saying it's not possible that he could be borderline top 10 for me, but there's so much risk involved. I'm not putting him in my top 10. I can't. It wouldn't shock me if a scenario played out like he gets hurt later in the season. They have nothing to play for. It's an unraveling, a whirlwind of disaster, and he just kind of does what Cooper Kupp did, doesn't really return. I just don't see how Davante Adams stays healthy, trying to catch hospital balls from Jimmy G. Does anybody understand why Darren Waller was probably traded? George Kittle, who reemerged under Brock Purdy this year, was dormant, hibernating when Jimmy G was under center for years, because Jimmy G can only throw to his first or second read, get the ball out really quickly because he's good? No, because he's scared of getting hit, and because the longer he holds onto the ball, the more likely a turnover or a fumble or a sack are happening. Jimmy G is going to be a disaster in Las Vegas. Imagine thinking you're upgrading Derek Carr using Jimmy G. Imagine getting rid of Darren Waller thinking that's even going to help. And imagine thinking Davante Adams isn't going to request a trade at some point during the year if he doesn't do it after the Darren Waller situation. He kind of was upset when this situation unfolded the way it did. Jimmy G was signed. Davante Adams immediately hit Instagram and kind of erupted. Then the next day he kind of took it back and said, let's go, Jimmy. Don't read into that, everybody. Let's go, Jimmy. Let's go get it. And then what? Waller's traded. I wonder if this guy's going to request a trade at some point this offseason. If he doesn't, who knows if he stays healthy, trying to catch hospital balls from Jimmy G. He's going to get hurt trying to keep Jimmy G relevant. And it wouldn't shock me if Jimmy G was removed from the lineup at some point during the year, even if he wasn't hurt. But Jimmy G can't stay healthy. This is a disaster. So many red flags to have this guy anywhere near your top 10. That said, is he close? Would I take him at some point? Sure, there's a line in the sand. I just honestly don't know. I haven't digested it long enough to know where my line in the sand is, where he goes from an avoid, line in the sand, flips into a value. I don't know where that line is. It's not in the top 10. I can tell you that right now. Get on over to thefantasyfootballshow.com and get your lifetime membership to content, tools, rankings. Get to thefantasyfootballshow.com and get your one-on-one text advice. And also go to Underdog Fantasy, promo code Smitty. They'll match up to $100 in your first deposit. Underdog Fantasy, promo code Smitty. I appreciate every one of you. This show is growing so fast, and I work for you. And I'm live Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm live whenever news breaks. I believe I'm the only one at least does it the way we do it. Live on-call fantasy football analyst in the YouTube space. If news breaks, I go live. I don't care if it's midnight. I don't care if it's 9 a.m. I'll be in my bathrobe. I don't care if it's noon. I go live whenever news breaks. Do you know anybody that does that? This is your new home if you just found us. Subscribe if you're new. I'm also live Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at midnight doing a lot of drafting on Underdog Fantasy, mock drafting as well. But on Underdog Fantasy, promo code Smitty. Again, and do this ahead of time. The link's in the description. I'll probably drop it in the live premiere if this is a live premiere. But make sure you're signed up ahead of time, because if you're not going to get into the drafts when we go do the draft. So click the link ahead of time, get signed up, $10 minimum. But if you do a $10 minimum, they'll match it and give you $10 on top of that. If you do 50, they'll match it, give you 50, up to $100. I'll see you all later. Appreciate you. Now get out of here.
This is the Fantasy Football Show with your host, Smitty.